listening to a Frozen Truth production.
Well, everybody, we took a quick little break, but welcome back to Tuesdays with Morris, and I'm Justyn Payne. I'm glad to sit down. I almost want to say this could be season 2. So
yeah, that's true. 2 weeks off, and we did 10 episodes.
We did 10 episodes. That's a good pilot.
There you go.
And the fun part is like get a chance to experience some life, pull things back into perspective, and then get at it again. And the fun part about us is that we're already talking in through the door. And so I asked him a question, so I got to ask it again. And because we like westerns, we like movies, we like artistic expressions all over the place. If you could, like Back to the Future 3. So, for example, Back to the Future 3, Michael J. Fox, his character Marty, is able to go back to 1885, but tell everybody that he is Clint Eastwood. That is his name. And he's literally living out pieces of Clint Eastwood movies in the West as if he's a bona fide genius. So I asked the question, if you could live out a movie in real time in a place where people were completely unfamiliar with it, what would that be?
Okay, it's a complicated question because on the one hand, even if I want to be a hero like Clint Eastwood in some of those movies or James Bond or whatever, it's going to involve a level of physical stress that I am not used to because I'm not an athlete. I've never been an athlete. I was never a good athlete.
So then you got to almost pull out the no secret agents.
I can't do secret agents or cowboys or D'Artagnan or any of those kinds of things. As much fun as that would be, because I know the first sword fight, even if I'm supposed to, if it's in the script that I survive it, the first sword fight's going to leave me panting, bruised, exhausted, etc. So I'd probably have to choose something more like.
So he's not the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Okay, one of my absolute favorite love stories is A Man and a Woman, which is a French art film from the 1960s. It's beautiful if you've never seen it.
Okay.
He's a race car driver. Once again, though, see, I don't know if I could play a race car driver either, because that's a super high-stress gig. I mean, if all I have to do is sit behind the wheel of a car and pretend to drive, I suppose I could do it,
Just live the life before the race. Everything without the race.
Exactly. That's when that's when my stunt man comes in and takes over for me. So I love that movie. It's a really beautiful, but even that movie, what you're really asking me is what kind of pain do I want in my life? Because if it's a movie, if it's a story, there's going to be some pain somewhere, right? And in this movie, A Man and a Woman, it's about two people who are both widowed, and they get together, and it looks like everything's going wonderfully, and then he realizes, no, she's still carrying the torch for her husband, right? And I'm not giving anything away by telling you this. And he leaves, and then he decides, no, it doesn't matter, I want her. And so he goes and catches her at the train station before she leaves. They have a big tearful embrace, and that's the end of it. It's got a wonderful soundtrack. And it's one of those movies, to me, it's one of the few movies I've seen that tells a straightforward love story in a sentimental way without being sentimental, cloying, artificial, manipulative, whatever. It's just a very... I just really liked it. I really like it. 60s, so they're smoking cigarettes like crazy. But
it is French.
Yeah. And it's French, yes. Probably unfiltered cigarettes.
I think I would go the comedy route. Maybe the ability to be unabashedly and almost unjudgmentally crazy, with that of like Jim Carrey and Liar Liar.
I haven't seen Liar Liar. Okay, you put another one on my list.
Man, I'm trying to help you. Whereas, at least with the premise of this, and not that I would ever want to lead up, like there's some pain, because to me, probably the greatest indicator of comedy is the fact of tragedy, but it's the turn, and we'll get there. But the setup is essentially he's a lawyer, and he has a kid that's about 6 years old. They ask the kid, "What does your father do?" He's a liar. oh, you mean a lawyer? No, he lies all the time. And so for his birthday, he just says, I wish my father would never lie just for one day. And he wakes up, and now this Fletcher, I think it's his name, and the character cannot tell a lie at all. And he's a lawyer and has a big case, and everything that comes out of his mouth is complete truth. Now, not that I want to hurt anybody's feelings. However, the comedic output of he has to say everything that maybe he's ever thought, or he cannot be filtered about anything he's doing. And
Jim Carrey, yeah, I can imagine.
Jim Carrey, but it's almost the fact that he is just so wonderfully animated about the fact that I cannot believe I'm about to have to say this, but here it is. But he also knows how to get away with it, or within the movie context, he gets away with it. So I would like to be able to express all of that honesty with the comedic turn to get out of it.
Well, I mean, sure. If I know I'm going to survive it,
yeah, I would like to.
That's just it. Being D'Artagnan would be great fun if I know I'm going to survive it, because
right.
I mean, if I'm the hero of the movie, I'm going to survive it. Would it be okay? To your point about pain being part of comedy, just recently I was able to show Chantel, the lady I've been seeing. I was just recently able to show her The Tramp by Charlie Chaplin, which is the movie where he really solidified that character. And he also did something in that movie that had never really been done before, and that is a movie that was essentially slapstick comedy, also has a note of sadness in it.
Right.
Because, it's got all the standard stuff, people running around bumping into each other and Keystone Cops type stuff. And it's quite funny. A lot of it's physically amazing. Those guys back then were nuts. Buster Keaton, probably the most of the
Absolutely.
bunch. I mean, they thought nothing about jumping off and falling down a hillside. And Dick Van Dyke said he saw Buster Keaton, met him when he was in his 60s, and he could still do all the pratfalls. Yeah. Chaplin was the same way. If you think Chaplin wasn't an athlete, try to walk around like that for a minute.
Right.
With your heels stuck together like, So anyway, but this movie, he falls in love with this woman, and he figures out she's in love with someone else. He leaves her a goodbye note, and then you see him walking down this road in a dejected sort of frame of movement, and then all of a sudden he just kind of bucks up his shoulders and walks off with the Johnny step, and that's the end of the movie. Comedies weren't supposed to end that way until he did it.
Right.
And of course, it makes everything, it just works. It makes the movie a lot more memorable. Right, because it has this element of sadness in it. But yeah, I mean, now, the more I think about it, the more it's, it'd be fun to be D'Artagnan or any of the kind of vehicles that my favorite actors have been in, where they've been heroes, knowing that I'm going to survive it, but it's still, okay, if I'm Toshiro Mifune in Yojimbo, which was the basis for A Fistful of Dollars, yeah, it's great. I'm a bad, there's testosterone coming off every pore of my body, and I'm very formidable. But I'm going to get, somebody's going to beat the crap out of me
There's
at one point.
There's going to be some slashing and some hurting and some bruising.
Yeah, exactly.
Will I survive? Well, I mean, technically. But I mean, okay, here's the second part B. Bradley Cooper made a movie called Limitless.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
And its premise is about he stumbles onto a drug that essentially unlocks, some people say you only use like 10% of your brain capacity or something.
Yeah, which is not really true, but yeah.
Such is the idea.
It's contested.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it's not really true, it's just contested.
Right. Well, this particular pharmaceutical revelation has unlocked the rest of the potential for your brain to process the information. And it does have the pain of essentially addressing addiction. Because it's going to wear off. It's a pharmaceutical drug. It will eventually fade out. And what do you do when you lose essentially the high of focus? I mean, you see even some folks who have to monitor their use of any kind of ADHD medication, things like that, because it's a stimulant as well. But the abilities of, if I were to ever particularly let's just say this, properly remember everything I've learned.
Oh, sure.
It's great that you learned, but I think the hardest part about education is not what you learn, it's what you retain and rehearse and are able to regurgitate within realistic application. That really kind of really pops out. That's probably why I really love our conversations, because we're able to we're pulling things off of the shelf that many of us forgot that we learned.
Well, I mean, okay, and sometimes it's because of the conversation, it triggers memories and stuff. Have you read the Sherlock Holmes stories?
Have I read them? No.
Okay. In one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, also in The Count of Monte Cristo, there were a couple of things said about that very subject that really made me think this is some of the most important stuff that's ever been written. In The Count of Monte Cristo, Edmund, I think is the main character's name. It's been a long time since I've read it. He's imprisoned, and he's imprisoned in this place where there's a man next to him, and they eventually found that way to communicate with each other. And he finds out that this guy has an incredible memory and an incredible command of information. And he asks him, "How did you do this?" And he says, "I have memorized 150 books." And he said, "You don't need more than that. You just need to make sure they're the right books.
The right books, and
you memorize, as much of them as you can." He says, "That way I'm never bored here. I've always got these books to regurgitate," right? Obviously, something like Plato's Republic or the Apology, some of those things, some of Aristotle, obviously, some of the Bible, some of the great poetry of the world. There's all kinds of things you can make a list of. Mm-hmm. Something about science,
right?
So you would have that information, math, etc. Of course, who wants to do that? Holmes and Watson are having a conversation in one of the stories. And Watson says he's figured out that Holmes knows all about X, Y, and Z and nothing about A, B, and C. And so he asks him about it. And he said, and Holmes tells him most people's minds are sort of like their houses. If you go into their house, there's going to be all kinds of little knickknacks that don't necessarily relate to each other, that are just the accumulation of a life. He doesn't put, I'm paraphrasing, but there's going to be a wild assortment of stuff that doesn't really agree with itself. It's just stuff. Right? And he said, your mind should be like your living room, and you should furnish it with those things that you most need. And so what does Holmes have at his command? He has all this stuff that he studied about cigar ashes. He has all this stuff that he studied about human beings' footsteps and their strides. He has all this stuff he studied about human hair. He's all this stuff he studied about chemicals. All the stuff that he uses to do the work that he's interested in. Mm-hmm. And nothing else. He's got music because that's his hobby. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know anything about politics. He doesn't know he knows nothing about anything that's irrelevant to what he's devoted himself to, which is solving crimes.
My wife and I have restarted the Big Bang Theory. So now I'm really ingesting Sheldon Cooper's entire journey, and it sounds a lot also like him. Like
Sheldon Cooper is Sherlock Holmes.
Exactly.
It's Sherlock Holmes played for laughs. Sherlock Holmes is the most popular character who is human in all of fiction. The only other person who's in the same league with him, and I'm talking about how many times they're portrayed on stage, how many times they're portrayed in films, how many times they're, et cetera, is Dracula. Dracula is not human, right?
Right.
But Dracula and Sherlock Holmes are more popular than Superman, Julius Caesar, Batman,
Odysseus.
Yeah, any of those characters. And there are more versions of Sherlock Holmes and Dracula, than there are of, for instance, Hamlet. There's not nearly as many film versions of Hamlet, and there's a bunch of film versions of Hamlet.
There really are, yes.
Yeah, as there are of variations on Sherlock Holmes and variations on Dracula. Of course, Batman is Sherlock Holmes and Dracula in a mashup. The guy dresses like Dracula and thinks like Sherlock Holmes, right? And Spock is Sherlock Holmes.
That's a good one. And then, once again...
Data is Sherlock Holmes.
Well...
And Data even plays Sherlock Holmes on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Because of when they're on the holodeck. But I like how you say, even with now I'm a Trekkie, is that with Spock, he denies his human side. He's half human, half Vulcan, but only embraces logic. And in Star Trek, the movie 4, episode 4 of the movie, his mother is literally asking him, why aren't you if the computer asks you how do you feel, you are just as much human as you are Vulcan. You should have the capacity to answer that question. He's like, but I'm not. I'm not going to. I'm not choosing to embrace that side of me. And that's very similar to what Sheldon and or Sherlock Holmes, like you said, it's like I'm choosing to only access this part of my brain. And that is where, even when you mentioned that, I even thought about whatever you have in your playlist, whatever you have on your shelf, whatever you let's just do like your own personal poll. Like after you listen to this, watch this, just go back to even if you're a music person, what are the past 20 songs that you've listened to? Like what genres are they? Or even, I think that's probably why people really enjoy this. In this digital age of music media, the big distributors such as Spotify, Apple Music, or even Tidal, at the end of the year, closer to December, they will give you a summarization of this is what you listen to. These were your top artists. These were your top genres. These were your top amount of minutes and replays.
Wow.
To give you, people say, what's your aura or what is your color or something like that, almost like a personality test. But it's a telling revelation of what is constantly filtering through your mind and your thoughts and your emotions and your output because of the input that is consistent, especially within your private space, because music has never been more personal and private than like today's times because of the earbud. Nobody knows what you're listening to. There's no bleed. There's noise canceling technology, so no one knows what's going on. There's even TikToks of what people may assume that you're listening to is like while you're in the gym. Meanwhile, it's opera or something like that.
Well, that's one of the cool things about that technology. I remember it in Intro to Fine Arts class when I played The Rite of Spring for people. I had one guy who just went crazy for it, and he got a recording of it and put it on his player and listened to it while he was downhill skiing, which is a perfect place. I can imagine it would be, it'd be great.
As a teacher, what I would do is I would literally, with their permission, especially like kind of a get to know you activity, in the beginning of the year, they all have their, they're walking in, they're still not knowing the rules and they're pushing social norms. And so students are walking with their phones and they try to hide one ear pod under their hair.
Of course.
Or
they do this number where they're playing with their phone while you're...
Really just messing with their music. But so I'll embrace it, and I'll just ask the simple question of, so what are you listening to? Just if you're willing to share, what are you listening to? And I'm not going to play it if I don't have to, but I will just look at the album art and be like, okay, you listen to Metallica Sandman. Congratulations to you. And this person's listening to My Chemical Romance. This person's listening to Mozart and Don Giovanni. That's a very random spot to land on as a high schooler, and I salute you for it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I can have blessed interaction, because then you see other students, while they hear all of these varieties and genres, are like, I didn't want to admit it, but I'm there too. Or I didn't want to admit it, but that sounds something I should check out, because you have no idea what would potentially unlock your potential if you would finally get it in rotation.
Speaking of which, I just put this on Do Not Disturb because I didn't want it to beep in the middle of it. I realized it was still on. That's the only reason I picked up my phone. Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. I used to do something like that, where I would give students some points towards their final grade if they would bring in a CD of some of their favorite stuff, and we'd play it and talk about it. Mm-hmm. Some of it was very good. Some of it was just... I'll never forget this one tune this guy brought in, where a guy was playing a 1-6-2-5 chord progression on the guitar over and over and over. And there wasn't much melody going on. It was a bunch of interesting patter. But after a while, I was just like, okay, I've heard enough. I'm not going to listen to this guy practice. Now,
there would be a fun... I think there's this fun little music trivia is if 1, 5, 6, 4, and how many pop songs are built off.
And how many church songs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, how great is our God is 1, 6, 4, 5. You know, so yeah. It's so take those 4 chords, shuffle at will, and basically you've got probably
80%.
Since the 60s, you probably got about 80% of pop music.
That's why I even liked there's when My Chemical Romance came out with Helena at that time around 2006 2005 or so. Popular pop emo band that really just kind of pushed a subgenre of kids in high school. But I loved it because it finally had a minor 4. You had a minor 4 and a chromatic approach to the 5 from that 4. Like you really enjoyed the tension. Thank you. And within that particular song, it created the dramatic effect necessary to accentuate the genre that they wanted to portray of drama and emotion and tension and essentially release of it all. And I'm like, thank you for actually using musicality and your expression versus just going back to the same 4 chords of Green Day. And
oh my God. Okay, there's a story about Hank Williams, Sr. I don't know if it's true or not. Country songwriter, wrote Cold, Cold Heart and If You Love Me Half as Much as I Love You, a bunch of really classic songs that were covered by people outside the country because they were good melodies. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the story goes, somebody was, well, Hank, I really would like to play guitar in your band, but I'm sorry, I only know 4 chords. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know C, and I know F, and I know G, and I know D, but I don't know anything else. And Hank was like, well, is there something else?
Is there anything else?
And if you listen to Hank's music, I mean, you know, that's one of the brilliant things about him is he could write these amazing melodies because he was a pretty good singer. You know, I mean, for the style, he's excellent. Simple guitar, you know, and really pretty. You know, he could yodel and he could yodel, and he also grew up in Alabama, and like a lot of musicians from that time period, he knew about blues and knew those musicians as well, and tried to consciously mix those kinds of things. Anyway, so yeah, I mean but at the same time, I never feel like listening to his music, which is classic honky-tonk country from the 50s, 40s and 50s. I never feel like there's a lack of tension. Mm-hmm. I always know when there's a resolution coming up.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
You know, and it's like one of the things that's happened with some of the music in the 60s, from the 60s on, modality was part of it, et cetera. You could basically do a song that never had to change.
Right.
I mean, James Brown's a good case in point. Rhythmically compelling, you know, 1 chord in a cloud of dust, and then all of a sudden he says, "Take me to the bridge." And he tells them, "We're going to change it up now, right?" Here comes the bridge.
2 spaces that occupy my mind with that, because as you brought up James Brown, I thought about Fela,
the African musician.
Yes, and
if you don't know him, he's awesome.
And I was glad to experience the Fela musical that even came to Austin a couple years back, but the idea of how it was just groove, just nothing but groove, just stay there in that groove, and it honestly never changed. So the only thing that could change was the melodic rhythmic expression within the vocals, similar to James Brown, essentially. That is just as much the same era that influences James Brown, actually. And then, but with what you said, it's the fact that you know at some point when that bridge, James Brown hits that bridge, that explodes the entire track.
Exactly.
And you don't know, even if you're like, you know, take me to the bridge, but they're not there yet. It's not on the 1. He's like, we're gonna go to the bridge. Take me to the bridge. Hit me now. But it may not come exactly when you musically expect it to in that next bar. And that's the tension that you're actually gravitating towards. And so what I notice is that music lost its tension until you get a little back into the pop 80s movement, where Sting says, it was the art of the bridge. The art of the bridge that comes back in pop music.
And guess what? Sting spent a lot of time listening to Thelonious Monk.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
That essentially the language is A-A-B-A,
Yeah.
and then a C, like a solid C section on a standard or things like that would
Sure.
completely unlock the depth of, even from lyrical expression to melodic approaches and or liftings and such like that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm in Falling Valentine right now. So like
well, it's funny because to me, pop music got to a level of slickness with people like Steely Dan.
No, yeah.
And Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life and the book album right before that.
My son loves Stevie Wonder. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, this very, very slick music. And then the reaction to that was things like the Sex Pistols.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and grunge and this, this very almost anti-music music. Lou Reed, said once that one chord is great. I'm quoting him directly here as well as I can. One chord is great. 2 chords is okay. 3 chords and you're getting into jazz. So, if that's your philosophy, then obviously you're going to have to come up with something besides traditional harmonic tension and release to make things happen.
I'm a gospel musician.
Well, that's crucial for gospel music. I mean, because it's the tension and release of it is part of what all gospel music that I've heard, urban gospel music, black gospel music, has a powerful healing quality. And part of that's there, and I'm not going to jump into supernatural stuff. Some people would say it was the anointing. Okay, very well. But from a musical point of view, there's things in the structure that are designed to elicit those reactions, both from the people who are listening to it and the people who are singing and participating in it.
Right.
I've found that. One of my favorites is "You Deserve the Glory and the Honor." I can play that song and at any tempo for any amount of time and not want to stop playing it because of what it's doing to me. It just makes me feel a certain way that I don't necessarily get from playing jazz, that I don't necessarily get from playing other music that I enjoy immensely.
Right.
It's just there's something built into it, and I think it's built into it by design, right? And it's not just black gospel music. It's also in a song like Farther Along. You know that one? Tempted and tried, we're off made to wonder. Okay. It's a classic. Everybody covers it,
okay,
right? Yeah. It's got that same thing. It's like, it makes you feel better to sing it, even though the message of the song is, things kind of suck right now, but they'll get better. I've noticed.
But that's essentially the good news about.
Exactly, the dark clouds on the horizon right now, but it won't last. No. Okay, here's a corollary to your question about movies. Coming back to that. If you can play any villain in any movie, who would be your first, like, say, 4 or 5 choices?
To play the villain.
And okay, let's make it clear that you can, given the magic of prosthetics and CGI, your actual physical appearance is not a barrier. You can play a woman villain if you like. You can play a Chinese villain if you want to, or whatever.
There is a good one. Do I go, let's see, comic? Do I go drama? There's a lot of good. That's a good one. A lot of heroes, a lot of things, but villains. Let's go Westworld.
You play Yul Brynner's character?
Potentially Yul Brynner, but I'm gonna go with HBO's adaptation.
I haven't seen it, but okay.
Dolores, who the villain of Westworld is essentially Dolores, which was originally the innocent protagonist within the Westworld story. However, the corruption and the use and the destruction of her by humans once she finally remembers what, like they stumble into a glitch that allows her to remember, that is created by the creator, essentially, that then she evolves like AI. And then, because I remember what you did last time I was alive in the story, yeah, I'm not exactly going to agree to that. And
Okay.
she has this gradual awakening. And
So it's kind of like that other movie that they made about AI with Ryan Reynolds, Free Guy. Did you see that one?
oh no. I
Where
want to say
basically
yes. He
he's
was an NPC, non-playable
Exactly.
character, and then suddenly he starts becoming more of essentially a main character.
Yeah, he becomes sentient.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about it's lovely. It's
That's
a
good
lovely
one.
movie.
That's a good one. Yeah, and so it becomes a
So this
villain.
sounds like similar kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a villain to humans, but a savior essentially to AI.
Yeah. Go ahead. It's just, okay. I was sitting there thinking, all these things came through my head about different characters I would want to play. I love Moriarty and her home stories. He's fascinating. And the guy who played Moriarty opposite Benedict Cumberbatch is really magnificent on the PBS version.
Okay.
That was one that came through my mind. But the one that I finally settled on is I like the agent in the first Matrix.
Oh yeah, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. That guy. And the lady was in Lord of the Rings. And I'm like going,
Right.
it's the same guy. Wow. Okay. And Burl Ives, the snowman in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, don't kid yourself. He played a heavy in a couple of movies and was just, oh, wow. It's a shame he never got a chance to do Shakespeare. I don't know if he would have been able to or not, but he certainly had the gravitas to do it. Obviously, he played Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and nailed it. He's fantastic.
That's a good one when it comes to villains. I mean,
Yeah.
the
He's not really a villain in that one, but he's absolutely a villain in another one called Day of the Outlaw, where he was just really dark. I was like, wow, okay.
here's a question with Silence of the Lambs.
Now, there's another great, oh my God. I remember seeing that and looking at Anthony Hopkins going, how do you do that? Your eyes look dead.
The question I would have is he really the villain? Because he's not. Because essentially the killer she's trying to establish, Anthony Hopkins is already locked
He's the
up.
source.
He's
He's
just
just a source who happens to get out.
He happens to get out eventually, but it doesn't qualify him exactly as the in.
He's not the
moment
villain of that story.
of that story, but he is twisted and supportive
He's a monster.
and a
I mean,
monster. Like
Yeah, I mean, the point of that story is if you want to catch, you set a thief to catch a thief. In other words, it's a true principle. I mean, in other words, the reason 12-step recovery programs have worked so well is that you've got people who've been through that, helping other people get through it. In other
Right.
words, how do you deal with addiction? I'm a recovered addict. I'm not saying I'm a recovered addict. I'm saying the people in the program is saying that I'm a recovered addict. I can show you how to beat this.
right.
And there is wisdom in that. I mean,
Which is why I like certain aspects of certain religions, because in order to understand one side, you almost have to completely immerse yourself into that life to then show or lead your way out of it.
oh wow. Have you read Siddhartha by Herman Hesse?
Ooh, no. Know it though. Like I've heard of it though.
Well,
Like,
it's interesting because it's kind of textbook Hinduism, but one of the things that happens, and it's Buddhism as well, because Siddhartha is it's Buddha, but it's not a biography of the Buddha. He goes through all these different, and this is not uncommon in people's spiritual search. There's a guy named Ray Vanderland who has a program called Follow the Rabbi.
absolutely.
And he went through all kinds of stuff trying to find his way.
Yes.
And got a doctorate in theology and then went and studied with rabbis in Jerusalem because he wanted to find out what he didn't know, and found out he didn't know anything.
Exactly.
And then there's another guy whose name won't come to me now, who doctorate in theology and, was dissatisfied. I'll find out his name and post it in the notes. And he went through a interesting kind of journey. In Siddhartha, the main character, Siddhartha, is a prince. He's wealthy. Everything's great. He's empty. So he decides to become a wandering monk and an ascetic. So he gets to the point where he can stand anything. And he stands everything. And he's this ascetic, and he meditates and goes without food and goes without water. And, he can stand anything. And he realizes, I'm still empty. Mm. And then so he says, okay, well, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back and get into life, but not as a prince. I'm just going to go out as a businessman. I'm going to make money, and I'm going to have fun.
That's right.
So he has fun, and he has fun, and he has fun. He finally realizes, I'm empty. I'm still empty. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about how he keeps searching and searching and searching, trying to find that connection.
Right, because then he along that journey, because he always started out as a prince, so he has unlimited resources to essentially reinvent himself, to do life in a disguise of a different path. Right. And with that, I think it even goes to even being a completely poverty. Like, he lives in poverty, yes. and still says, I'm not here. Like, so I've been a prince. I've been a working class citizen. I've gone through these levels of experiencing life, and still haven't found what I'm looking for. You too, and yeah, and that is always. But it is that. The villain, however, going back to kind of step back, is that if you do not, let's say, like, you see yourself, you either die a hero or see yourself live long enough to become a villain. That's Batman.
Which movie is that in?
That would be The Dark Knight.
Okay.
Said to Harvey Dent.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's the complete understanding of, I finally have seen enough of the furthest extenses of life to have a much more qualified understanding that I know nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, if you're...
Let's just say, if I stick with the book I like, in Ecclesiastes, it's written by by Solomon, who was the richest man on earth, who then spends, after he did all of Proverbs, not all of, but many Proverbs, and we understand he's the trillions and trillions of dollars regarding wealth in the world. Then he writes a book called Ecclesiastes, which says all is vanity, all is nothing. Work hard, enjoy your life in a way, but other than that,
realize it's all gonna fade away. I mean. I want to believe that some things we have created are at least closer to immortal than not. For instance, Michelangelo's David. I mean, Plato's Republic. There's things like that I'd like to believe are going to be around forever. But regardless of what I may believe, if the sun goes nova, it's all gone. So is anybody who can remember it.
Well, right? we had a moment of thought that then, when it comes to literature, it's when you say Plato's David, or it's only as good as those who appreciate it.
Ha! Ooh, okay.
So if
okay, I got a conundrum. I got a corollary to that. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, it's that of as long as people will appreciate art, they will sustain art. But if they just simply say, I don't care for that, there's no backing, there's no support, there's no financial support. And that is why we even have in the push, we're getting arts back in communities, arts back in schools, arts and instruments into the hands of young people, so that when they grow up, they at least have an appreciation. Even if you never played it, you can be like, I know how hard it is to play that. Let me give some appreciation and respect to the one who has mastered it. Stuff like that.
I am not pessimistic about the future of visual art, and here's why. All you have to do is open up any of the current video games that are available, or any of the current movies we're making. I was noticing, I watched, Chantel and I watched the Lego Batman movie. Have you seen that one? In many ways, that may be the best Batman movie of them all.
We're starting over again. We're going to see the Lego movie tomorrow because I love it.
The first Lego movie?
Everything is
I
awesome.
loved it. Yeah, it was awesome. And I'm sitting there looking at all three of these movies. They're spectacular. I mean, the visual is, wow. And I'm thinking, in many ways, movies from my childhood are already at a disadvantage if I try to show them to a younger audience because they don't look as interesting as those movies do. Now, there are exceptions, but nonetheless, there's that. So there's and I remember looking at various video games. The one that was set in space. I'm just going like, this is amazing. It looks like I feel like I'm looking at the Webb telescope. Right. So there's definitely an art, a market, and a need for visual art. Music. It worries me when they tell me they can tell a computer to compose a Bach fugue, and you almost can't tell. You know, I think, though, there seems to be, especially COVID drove this home, people like hearing music live.
Oh, that's the part, yeah.
And so I was afraid, and I think we've been over this before, I was afraid that by the time I got to this age that, I'd call it blues and B flat and nobody would know what I was talking about. Fortunately, I've been proven wrong, right?
Thank goodness.
I mean, the blues hasn't gone anywhere. I mean, it's still a force to be reckoned with in American music. It may be like most popular things that are once massively popular, they eventually become a niche or niche things that exist over here where they have a devoted following. Okay, the swing dance craze was national and big in the 1990s because of the movie Swing Kids and some other stuff. Right. And there were all these horrible bands trying to play swing music. They didn't know what they were doing. Now, the bands that you hear at swing dances are pretty good, and then can play the music because they've studied it. Right? It's not
they have to hibernate beyond the fad.
Thank you. That's perfectly put. And that's true of so many different things. Hamilton would not have happened when rap was at its height.
That's a good point.
Hamilton happens after what's his name?
Lin-Manuel or Miranda?
Lin-Manuel, yeah, I can't remember his name.
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. He's fantastic. And I thought Hamilton was brilliant. I haven't seen the other one yet, but I've seen pieces of it. It looks good too. So yeah, I mean, and not only that, I was intrigued that have you seen Hotel Transylvania? Any of those films?
Yeah.
There's rap in them.
There is.
And it's it's toned down for the kids and all that, perhaps.
And even Moana, the whole "You're Welcome" song is literally a rap. Like
somebody said yesterday's art becomes yesterday's avant-garde becomes today's mainstream.
Yes.
Right? And so, yeah, I mean, and in one respect, once it becomes mainstream, it's going to get some of the edges knocked off of it. It's not going to have the same, but the sound becomes part of the pastiche that anyone can draw from. Well, so where's music going to go? I have no idea, but I think it's just going to be more combination and recombination of
recombinations that it has to survive. Like I said, I see it hibernating through the fad because the wave essentially has to pass so that way the next generation can pick it up as rebellion. Because that's the other part. Like sometimes it like leapfrogs in time so that the next generation will pick up on every other generational fad as a rebellion against the current one that's raising them.
One thing that really tickles me is all these reaction videos where you have people who are in their 20s who've never heard, Carlos Santana's prime music or the Beatles' prime music or Louis Armstrong.
Right.
And they're listening to this stuff and they're getting wide-eyed and going, wow, where's this been all my life? He says, well, yeah, this is the stuff your grandfather and your grandmother and your mother and dad tried to turn you on to that you were too cool for the room for when you were, 15.
Right.
But now that you're 25, okay.
You can appreciate it as such. But, But to ask the question, like going back to Michelangelo's David, as long as there is potentially the perpetual motion of rediscovery, then they have a chance. However, regarding, let's just say, even saturation of the market, if people feel like they don't have to go anywhere to experience what they think is life, because essentially the greatest testimony of Michelangelo's David is not the existence of it. It is the presence of it. You have to go see it in person. to truly recognize what it meant to see a sculpture. It's not a picture, it's a sculpture. And we only know it as visual presentation on a textbook, or now VR, or even AI generated images on a 3.5-inch screen.
Or even if it's on a big screen. Having stood in front of it, I can absolutely say amen to everything that Justyn just said, and I have a great story about that from teaching intro to fine arts. I would tell my class that, look, I stood in front of this statue, and if I could go back there right this instant, if it meant, voiding any appointments I have for the next day or two, right, I would walk right out the door, get on the plane, go, no change of clothes, nothing, stand in front of that statue until I'd had enough, and then just come back home. That would be enough to do that plane ride.
Right.
It is that amazing. People have said it's the finest work of art in the Western canon. I'm not going to argue with them, right? It is to see it in person. It's to see something that when I saw it, I'm sitting here in this walk up to it. I deliberately waited until I made sure it was the last thing I saw. I went to all the Academy of Fine Art in Florence, and then I walked up to it.
That's nice.
Exactly.
And then now
I'm going to look at this thing, and walking by all these other unfinished Michelangelo statues that are amazing too. And so then you get up there. I got up to it, and I'm within a few feet of it, and I decided, okay, now I'm going to look at it. And as soon as I did, I could feel that kind of stinging behind my eyes, tearing up, and everything. Oh, I'm a sentimental old fool. And then I realized it was quiet in that. It was so quiet in that room. The only thing I heard around that statue were the people with cameras going. That was the only. I didn't hear anybody talking at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't take any pictures of it because I've seen tons of pictures.
Because you've seen pictures. This is not. I mean, let me just even take that moment. Even just being a religious person, which many of y'all know who I am, is that I even tell people, can we please put our phones away, even in spiritual-based settings? Because you cannot capture what is surreal, what is sublime, what is supernaturally indescribable of the moment that you're trying to encapsulate, as if you're going to relive it later on this little screen. There is literally no picture worth keeping to describe the presence. That's why I say there's the presence in that moment. Like I lived in Houston for a very, very long time, and then I moved to Austin, and we got a little bit of hills in Austin, but in Houston, I'm used to flat land. I can be 45 miles almost away from Houston and see downtown Houston. That's how flat it is.
Yep.
So when I finally went on my first trip to Colorado, and I drove there, and then I'll even describe my second trip, really, because it was my daughter that really just set me off. She's 2.5, maybe 3 when we drive to Colorado. And with a 3-year-old understanding of the world, knowing that this is what a mountain is. You see it in a textbook. This is a mountain, this is a lake, this is a river. And even that's pretty advanced to know these geological forms. We get to Albuquerque, which is a good size cliff mountain, about 3,000 feet up. She says, "Daddy, you made it to the mountain, yay!" And to me, I almost wanted to cry because, number one, I'm like, thank God I got a really smart daughter. This is your first time and you understand that is a mountain. But that's how I took it. I'm like, you may have seen it in textbooks. You may have seen it in this, that. But that is a mountain. And then when you get to the Rockies, and then when you see the snow-capped peaks from 100 miles away, and I'm like, that is a mountain. And I cannot tell you, not as much as I talk, and my wife probably loved that Colorado trip because I was the most quiet. Just, there's no words to describe, for me, the majestic feeling of being in the mountains when I'm finally like, I bought a truck just because I wanted to drive that truck in the mountains. That's the reason I had that truck, 4-wheel drive, because I said, I'm coming back here. And I did with that truck to drive up that mountain and say like, whoa, and say nothing. And to be in the quietness of, let's say, Alta Lakes, a mountain lake, 12,000 feet up, pristine water, and complete silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went to Big Bend for the first time, which is not that magnificent, but it's magnificent even in itself. There's a place in the Chiselos Mountain Lodge where you can sit on a bench and look out, and there's a mountain that forms like a V or a U, two mountains, and you can look out through that onto the landscape. And while you were describing all this, I remember there's a line that Peter O'Toole uses in a movie called The Lion in Winter, magnificent film. He's been outside walking around looking at the stars on Christmas night. He comes in and says, "The sky is pocked with stars. What eyes the wise men must have had to see a new one in so many." And the McDonald Observatory is out there where Big Bend is.
Yes.
And you go out there and it's like, if it's a clear night, you cannot believe what we've been missing for most of our lives because of street lights, because of nighttime illumination. Now, nighttime illumination is necessary if we're going to live in big groups of people, because it makes things, the data's there. It's safer, right? If you have lit lighting for the streets, so, you know. But at the same time, it was not unusual, I don't think, for people in a time before electricity to know where all the constellations are, to know where all the stars were, because that was your entertainment when the sun went down. I don't know all that. My wife did. She could point out, you know, there's Orion and there's, you know, this, that, there's all these. And I'd be like,
me and my wife just argue which one's the little or the Big Dipper. Like,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I can find the Dipper usually, but I'm not. Yeah, exactly. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. You know,
I'm more of a Ursa what?
Exactly. Well, you know, I mean, once again, if it's back in the day when, you know, people are trying to navigate by the stars, then obviously you know where everything is.
Right.
And you have to. Right. And there's nothing getting in the way of you seeing them because there's no light pollution.
Right.
And we've got so much light pollution now that when I went to Big Bend for the first time and saw the world without light pollution, I was just like, oh my goodness.
What is it?
Yeah.
2001. My God, it's full of stars.
Yeah. Ooh, Hal would be a great villain to play. You would just be a disembodied voice. I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave. That would be a fun role. Whoever got to do that, I'm
just
sure.
Because you can read lips, that's what it is. It's like, no, I've got eyes everywhere, and I know exactly what you said, and I'm just
you were going to disconnect me, and I just can't allow that.
That's a good one. Well, friends, on that note, what I'm going to do is actually disconnect on this season 2, episode 1 of Tuesdays with Morris. It is so glad to be back with y'all this summer, and we're grateful to hang and share with you life and good times and art and music. And so we pray that you had a wonderful conversation with us. Yes, sir.
You don't have to go look at Michelangelo's David, and you don't have to go to Colorado, and you don't have to go to Big Bend to see something miraculous. Go out and look carefully at any plant in your yard. Yeah,
like put the phone down, and I'm gonna be like a kid. Sometimes just get down there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my thing. I'm 6'4", and sometimes I literally have to just get down on the floor and just look at life again from crawling on my belly.
Oh, there's a book by Bill Bryson called A Short History of Nearly Everything. And it's about geological history, not about our history. And one of the things he said that I had never thought about before was that you could take a shovel full of earth and try to look at it. He said there are more species and more things living in that shovel full of earth than we can number. That
Right under your feet.
Right, yeah. Just
Right under your feet.
There it is. A handful of Earth has got more stuff in it that's alive. Much of it microscopic, sure. But there's just, I feel like Carl Sagan now, billions and billions of stars. Well, there's billions and billions of organisms. You know,
Well,
we haven't classified all the species of creatures that are in the world, and we probably never, in the Earth, and we probably never will.
Well, I mean, when you said that, I got triggered. I was a little bit more of the Trumpish said, billions and billions of, and so go out and.
I guess you watched Carl Sagan too. All of us did back then.
Well, someone has to make contact, and so.
If you didn't get it, Contact is a movie based on a novel written by Carl Sagan with Jodie Foster.
You got to be quick with it. You got to be quick.
Foghorn Leghorn. You got to keep your eye on the balls, huh? Eyeball. Almost had another one now.
That's a good one. I love Foghorn.
Oh, yeah.
So do something that sees the beauty in today and sees the beauty of the moment. Go at and appreciate even a blade of grass because it had to grow while you were sleeping. And it appreciates the rain. It appreciates the sun. It appreciates what life throws at it. And so be like a blade of grass. Enjoy it. Enjoy life. And we're so glad to have you. We'll talk to you later. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
You're listening to a Frozen Truth Production.